This is a video demonstrating some stretches that will help with lower back health. This is a question I get asked a lot. I guess, what are the best stretches for the lower back? These stretches don't hit the lower back directly, but what they do is they stretch a lot of the muscles around the hips, again helping to mobilize our hips, and that in turn keeps our lower back healthy. The first stretch here is the simple hamstring stretch. All I'm using is an old jiu-jitsu belt to help with the stretch. I'm trying to keep my leg fairly straight in this case. Bottom leg, or the leg that's on the floor, is relaxed, it's slightly bent. Trying to keep my spine neutral. And again, I'm just getting to that point where there's a bit of tension in the back of the thigh. What I'm trying to do here is hold each stretch for about 30 seconds. And again, it's important to note when we're stretching the muscles here, I want to try and maintain our breathing, our slow and controlled breathing. What happens a lot of the time is I think people tend to hold their breath and tense up when they're stretching, and obviously that's going to be counterproductive to what we're trying to do here. So trying to relax as much as we can through deep controlled breaths. Next stretch here is going to be a hip stretch. All I'm doing here is I'm bringing my left ankle onto my right thigh, and again I should be getting a stretch just on the left hip here. One subtle thing that I'm doing here is that I'm getting my elbow and I'm just gently pressing my elbow against my left thigh to increase the stretch. Again, make sure there's no pressure on the outside knee here. So in this case, my left knee. And what we're trying to do here also with our upper body here, are keeping our shoulders on the floor and keeping our head back on the floor too. So there's a second glute stretch here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my shin. I'm going to step my left foot to the floor. I want to try and keep my left knee pointing toward the ceiling. What I'm going to do here is try and keep my shoulders on the floor and look away from the legs. Ideally here I want to keep my glutes or my hips on the floor, square at the floor here. Now I'm tight, so my left hip is coming off the floor slightly, but in time I'm trying to keep my hips flat on the floor here. So this stretches the glutes, but also it's good for our upper back as well, improving our thoracic mobility. So again, about 30 seconds, and when the stretch is done, all I'm going to do is transition to the other side. And again, I really want to stress in this one, make sure there's no pressure on the outside knee. So again, in this case it's my right knee, and gently here, or subtly at least, what I'm doing is I'm just pushing my right knee out with my right elbow, just to help increase the stretch. Again, shoulders and head are back on the floor. I want to transition to the second glute stretch here. I'm going to hold onto my shin and bring my right foot to the floor. Again, you can see it clearer on this side. My right hip is coming off the floor slightly. Probably a lot, but it's still pretty good for me as I'm quite inflexible. So I'm trying to keep my shoulders on the floor and I'm trying to look away from the legs here. And again, just making sure there's no pressure on the knee here on this. It should be a stretch just in the hip. Again, about 30 seconds. When that's done, we're going to move on to the hip flexor stretch next. So this is an important one. If we're sitting down a lot throughout the day, whether it's at a desk at the office or in the car, hip flexors are definitely going to get tight. So this is a really good stretch to do. So again, whatever knee is on the floor, on that same side I'm going to reach up to increase the stretch along the connective tissues and the fascia on that side, but also primarily the hip flexors. After 20 seconds, I'm going to raise both arms to try and increase the stretch, trying to lengthen my spine and looking up slightly. Also, it's subtle here when I'm trying to keep myself or my belly button facing 12 o'clock, so straight ahead. It's quite common for the hips to turn out slightly here. We want to try and keep them facing forward. So this stretches for the adductors, for the inside of the thigh, and it ties in well with the hip flexors. What I'm doing here is I'm stepping my foot out to the side. I want to keep the sole of the foot on the floor. And also I want to keep my back arched slightly here, so I'm not rounding my back. I'm just moving around slightly here to try and find a sweet spot in the stretch. So again, it's the inside of the thigh. And same thing, I want to hold for about 30 seconds. So when that's done, I'm going to come back in, I'm going to reset, and I'm going to do the hip flexor stretch on the other side. So left knee on the floor, I'm going to raise my left arm up overhead. Again, I don't want to overarch my back too much here. I'm trying to think about keeping my spine long, more so than just leaning back. So now to go into the stretch a little bit further, I'm going to raise both arms, trying to lengthen my spine again, and push the hips forward slightly. So ideally now I transition to the adductor stretch on the other side, but I forgot to do so. So I've just jumped the gun and gone straight into the rec fem stretch. So that's for the front of the thigh. Okay, and this is quite an intense stretch. So sometimes you might need to do this stretch with our hands on the floor and leaning forward more. But ideally we're trying to raise our torso here. And I'm keeping my hands kind of more or less on my tummy here to stop my sternum raising too much, because I don't want to overarch here, because I'll lose the stretch. I want to keep my spine straight up and down, trying to avoid leaning back. So again, trying to breathe, trying to control our breathing here, trying to relax into the stretch. So again, this stretch will be on the front of the thigh. So what I'm going to do is transition. So other foot back. I want to try and bring my backside toward my heel. And again, just watching that we're not overarching the spine. Again, I'm trying to breathe here. It's quite an intense stretch, so be careful with this one. I find this useful for knee health too, actually, as well. A lot of people have them if they get kind of tethered tendonitis or pain under their kneecap, particularly from a lot of running. I find this is kind of good at maintenance too, just to keep the knees healthy. Okay, and just to ease out then, I'm just going to do a few cat camels here. So again, just to release the facet joints in the spine, I'm going to flex and extend my spine. So I'm going to round out my back and look down. Kind of arch and look up. Trying to keep my shoulders and hips where they are. It's really more about moving the spine here. Bring the shoulder blades together too in this position. As I round my back, I'm going to bring them apart. So this sequence here should help definitely mobilize the hips, which in turn will help keep your lower back healthy and will help keep your knees healthy also. Because if our hips are tight, it requires our lower backs and our knees to be more mobile than they should be, I guess.